looked forward with a certain pleasant anticipation to the prospect. But until the night Roddy was born, all of his concern had been for Grace, who had endured a difficult pregnancy. And at the hospital he was so filled with relief on hearing that things had gone well that he had to be reminded that he could go and look at the baby. When he did, the surge of emotion that squeezed his heart had overwhelmed him. And in the nearly 3 years since, his love, his need to protect this sweet-tempered, sickly, defenseless little thing, had grown even fiercer as the child's frail constitution became more apparent. It seemed to Carlisle, although he never expressed it to Grace, that the boy's connection to life, to this earth, was frighteningly flimsy. 2 or 3 times a night Carlisle would get up to make sure his son was still breathing. He smiled now at the memory of the happy, sighing smile he would get if Roddy happened to be awake when he came in. Sometimes, if the boy were asleep, Carlisle would, accidentally, jog his tiny foot or shoulder just to see that dawning smile of recognition. He never told his wife about that either. His own smile faded as the current situation came back to the front of his mind. Slowly he exhaled the smoke, thin streams from both nostrils, and opened his eyes. When he did, he was startled by the sight of a thin, sallow man dressed in a black, much-worn 3-piece woolen suit uncomfortably standing a bare 2 feet from him, waiting to be acknowledged. The rest of the acrid smoke exploded from Carlisle's lungs, scalding his nose on the way out and making him sneeze. "Willie! For God's sake, man, how long have you been standing there? I thought you said you'd be half an hour." "You said it was important. I thought I should hurry." William Skinner, Carlisle's brother-in-law, looked ill at ease. The Merry Monarch, all gleaming wood and polished brass and 19th-century hunting paintings, was not the kind of pub that he usually frequented. "I appreciate that," Carlisle said, motioning him to sit down. "What would you like? Beer?" "Half and half," Willie said. Carlisle called out to Sadie. "Half and half, please, Sadie." "Ale and bitter," she called back. "Ale and porter," Carlisle said, knowing Willie's preferences. Sadie's disapproval showed as she pulled down the ceramic handle of a beer tap. Ale and porter was a rough-tasting Cockney concoction that could get you drunk in a hurry, and not often ordered at the Monarch. But then Willie was as true a Cockney as there ever was. London born and bred within the sound of Bow Bells, in Watling Street, in fact, right around the corner from St. Mary-le-Bow itself. Carlisle waited for the beer to be delivered and for Willie to have his first nervous sip. "Willie, I have a very great favor to ask of you." Willie blinked several times, his lips compressed. He sat up straighter. When favors had been asked and given between them in the past, it had been Willie who'd been the supplicant and Carlisle the grantor. And indeed, Carlisle had almost always granted them, usually in the form of small salary advances, or modest string-pulling on one minor governmental matter or another. Now, Willie appeared concerned that repayment day was at hand. As well he might be. Willie Skinner had been married to Grace's angelic sister, Rose, who had since died in childbirth. The baby, George, had survived. Since then he had remarried, so technically the 2 men were no longer brothers-in-law, but the nature of their relationship, having been formed, remained. It wasn't always an easy one. Willie, a few years younger than Carlisle, had emigrated to Jersey in 1932, when the Depression in England had been at its worst. Other than his luck in snaring the beautiful Rose a few years later, he had soon shown himself to be one of those people whom fate just seemed to have it in for. In the 4 years that Carlisle had known him, he'd broken his nose, his elbow, twice, and 2 of his fingers, and had come down with appendicitis, gallstones, and, of all things, malaria. His luck with employment hadn't been any better. In the space of 6 months, he'd gotten himself let go from 3 different jobs: assistant floor manager at a chemist's, bookbinder's assistant, and delivery man for a stationery store. His wages going down with each move. It wasn't that he was an obnoxious or difficult employee, or that he embezzled, or that he was discourteous to customers.